We are pleased to be joined by our last guest today, who is the chief judge at the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Michigan, Judge Denise Page Hood, with us on the Oakland County Megacast. Judge Hood, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me here today. I appreciate it.
We appreciate having you on. So the court systems have definitely had to pivot, as well as many other systems and industries, during this coronavirus pandemic. For those that are unfamiliar with what's been changed in the court system, particularly for the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Michigan, how have operations been changed during the pandemic, and how has that impacted working through the caseload at the court?
Well, like every place, like all our lives, they have changed dramatically. That means that they've been turned on their head, so to speak. Everyone thinks of court as a courthouse where you come in and you go to a courtroom and there's a proceeding taking place. There's a judge and court people and lawyers. If you're looking for a jury trial, there's a jury in the jury box. And all that has changed, like instantly. You will recall that many people know that the legislature passed the CARES Act, which was to help people deal with the pandemic. And part of that was to allow the judiciary to do a number of things that constitutionally were required to be done in person, particularly criminal proceedings, over video conferencing or over teleconferencing. And so we were given the opportunity to do all of the initial type appearances, arraignments, violations of supervised release and the like, where a person, a defendant, would come into court and actually be before the judge and have a recording of it and that the public could attend. We were permitted to do those remotely. So basically, since March 24th, my entire court almost everyone has been working remotely. We have a few things that are being done in person now, but mostly still everything is done remotely, including that you can offer a plea if you're pleading guilty and be sentenced via video conferencing. And due to the very hard work of our subcommittee on public access, led by our judges Berg and Roberts and our IT department, Josh Mata, we have been able to also allow you to go to our website, find the proceeding you're interested in, click on it, and get information about how to look at it over Zoom, just like we're doing this. What it allows a person to do is to find the case, and when the case is being heard, to click on that and be like in the audience. Like if you had a Zoom webinar, they would be an attendee versus a panelist. And so we're able to do that. Of course, we have to have the permission relative to pleas and sentencings of the defendants involved. But for all the other initial appearances, we also try to get a waiver of an in-person proceeding. And except in a very few instances, we've been able to do that. And then our judges and our other people have been working from home. They've been working remotely. It's been kind of a challenge for some of us who are used to always coming in the office and being on the bench to sit before our computers and have Zoom conferences or Zoom meetings, and to do all of our work without paper, to be doing everything with our computers. So that's a little bit different. We did open up our courthouse for the grand juries to meet. They meet in secret, so I can't tell you too much about that, but we did arrange for them to do that, and in safety, with social distancing and the ability to do a lot of hand washing and great hygiene and cleaning before and after they come in. So we have been turned kind of on our heads. It's a little bit different that the public courthouse would really be something that you watched over the internet.
And it's interesting, too, to think about courthouses are not just responsible for administering these court cases and these trials in person and virtually in this case. There's also a lot of work that's being done behind the scenes each and every day to keep detailed records and to process important documents. The U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Michigan, which you oversee, the court has about 350 employees, operates on a $25 million annual budget, and received nearly 5,200 criminal and civil filings just in the 2018-2019 fiscal year. How has record keeping been impacted by the pandemic, because it has to be done in a prudent manner, and it has to be done in a way that protects these documents for these cases.
Well, one of the things I can say is one of our issues has been the mail, how to get the mail in the building, and then again, how to get it to the various departments that it goes to, how to get it to the judge's office, and then back to the clerks if we need to. But one of the really good things that has happened is several years ago, after the kind of anthrax scare in Washington at the Administrative Office of the United States Courts, we went to electronic docketing. So you can docket almost everything electronically. There are very few things that require even a wet signature from the judge. There still are some things, but not as many as they were before. So I can basically have a sentencing. My court case manager can send the sentencing to me over our court internet. I can sign the judgment papers, or I can approve my electronic signature to be attached. I can send it back to her and she can file it, and none of us ever need to go in the courthouse. But there are some things that we still need to do, like our clerk's office operations department still needs to be able to docket many things. We have pro se filers, and if you go on our website, you can also see a place where if you're a pro se filer who could not file electronically before, can now file electronically during this period of the COVID crisis. If that works out well, we may think about continuing that, but it puts a limitation on the page number and some other qualifications on it, but you can file electronically. So many of the things we can do electronically. But for instance, when we do what we call our duty court, which is your initial appearance or your arraignment, a person is brought into court. Where right now, if they're in one of the county jails where we house people, they just can be remote at the county jail, and we do it over Zoom. If you get picked up by the marshals, you're brought into the marshals lockup, and we actually have used a courtroom in Ann Arbor and a courtroom in Detroit for that defendant to appear over Zoom. So everybody is remote, including the defendant, even though someone has to be at court to make sure that that person is in the courtroom, they're protected, the court is protected, that kind of thing. When we brought in the grand jurors, we need the grand jury room, the jury assembly room, and their managers and employees to come in and make sure that people could come in, that the mail's answered, that the phone calls are answered, that kind of thing. And some of those things need to be done in person, but not all of them. And then, of course, if the grand jury is returning an indictment, there have to be some operations people there to file those documents and to make sure that a magistrate judge or a judge is contacted for the return. And we have, like I said, the mail. We have some people from our court services doing the mail. But most of us are able in these times to do what we need to do from home. Now, one thing we aren't doing yet is jury trials. So if you have a jury trial, you have the right to have it in open court. You have the right to confront the witnesses. There are attorneys on both sides involved. You have to bring in jurors, not only jurors to be selected to serve on the jurors, but then jurors who are willing to come in every day and listen to the case. Now, our courtrooms, they're not set up for social distancing. The jurors basically sit right beside each other. And in the audience, if there are more than 50 people, you probably have to stream it to another court room because our courtrooms aren't that big. And in the middle where the lawyers are and the defendant and the court staff, that's all pretty close spacing. So we're not having jury trials yet, and we probably won't until the fall, but we're getting ready. We're putting up the measuring for the initial plexiglass that we'll have to use in some of the areas. We're looking at how to social distance in a courtroom and where we would stream that live proceeding to, so that people who are interested, like the family of the defendant or the victim and the victim's families, could sit and listen to the trial as if they were in court.
The Honorable Judge Denise Page Hood with us on the Oakland County MegaCast. She is the Chief Judge of the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Michigan. And on the topic of these jury trials, have they Of course, they're not going on right now. Have they been delayed? And does that create any sort of murky ground for these cases, being that people do have a right to a fair and an expedient trial?
Yeah, that we not only have in federal court the constitutional protection to have a speedy trial, but also a statutory protection to have a speedy trial. And in my administrative orders, and if anyone's interested, they can go on our website and see all of the administrative orders that have been issued since March 24th, dealing with how court is going to take place. They're all there for the public to see. Just visit our website. Um, but what I have determined in all of them is that under the CARES Act, because we weren't going to be able to have trials, I could waive the Speedy Trial Act and a defendant's right to a speedy trial because these are extraordinary circumstances and because it meets the ends of justice not to have a jury trial at this time. At this time, a jury trial in the setting that people are used to seeing a jury trial is just not safe for either court staff, the judges, or the community, including the jurors and the defendants, and including people who might be victims. And so it's just not safe right now. And because of that, I could waive your speedy trial. But when we get to a point that we can have a jury trial, we'll be looking at how should we prioritize them so people don't stay in custody longer than they need to stay in custody, that people aren't edging up toward what their sentencing guideline would be before they even have a trial, and to just have fairness and justice to protect the defendant's right to have a trial and to have their witnesses, the witnesses against them and their own witnesses, if they choose to, appear in court and appear in court in a safe environment.
Judge, I'm told by my notes that small groups of employees are expected to start returning this week to the district court for the Eastern District of Michigan. How is that changing plans maybe for going forward? Is there a chance that we may have a hybrid of some in-person cases and some virtual cases as we progress forward toward at least maybe September, when you had mentioned previously that these jury trials may begin once again?
Well, we're doing the same kind of phasing that the governor has in place, except we have our own phases that are set out by the Administrative Office of the United States Court that have to do with what is the level of the COVID virus in your community and the service area that we provide for. And then also, have you done the things at court to protect the employees? So in my last administrative order, which is 38, I believe, the employees were allowed to come back to court as needed and when requested by a supervisor. And so that means that if there's something that you need to do at court, you can come in and do it. There are some requirements. People have to be tested. People have to screen. They have to engage in social distancing. They have to wear a mask in all the common areas. And so we're getting ready to, and we're phasing people in. For instance, only one person can be on the elevator, where we used to be able to squeeze in 8 people. Now only one can go up at a time. And if you're using the stairs, you have to social distance. It phases us in so we can see, do we have any breakouts of the virus with a small number of people coming in? Then we'll phase in a larger number of people. Pretty soon we'll have some, well, I shouldn't say soon. At least toward the fall, we'll have some in-court proceedings that are short of a jury trial. We even have one judge right now trying a civil bench trial, which means it's a trial before a judge, on Zoom. And so I think that lets us know that there are lots of things that we're doing and we'll continue to do using Zoom because it doesn't require us to come to court, and the public can still have access to the proceeding. And as long as we can do that, I think some people will use the Zoom for things that they otherwise people brought people to court for that maybe people didn't need to come to court for. For instance, if you have counsel that's coming from, another state, that person can appear on Zoom and the local people can appear on Zoom and the judge and everybody. And it's just as if you're in court because the public can click on if they want to and see what's happening. Now, some judges will choose to have everything in person because that's how they felt court should take place. But it isn't any less for you to have your proceeding over Zoom. I'll give you an example. I did a sentencing about maybe 2 weeks ago, and it's a webinar style thing so that people who are interested in seeing the proceeding appear as attendees. And we had not yet had the defendant come in. And even though the people are anonymous, because they're in the webinar, sometimes you can see their name. And we thought a person in the webinar was the defendant. I said, no, the defendant is coming from a jail, and the jail number will come up. And sure enough, I could tell that person, the defendant, that one of his relatives was attending by public access. They were on the Zoom as an attendee because we had, for a second, seen their name. And I think that gave that defendant some, calm about the fact that someone was there in support of him. Even if he couldn't see them, they could see him and they could see the whole proceeding. And later on, when they were able to write to him or potentially visit him, they could tell him about that, how that had occurred. But I think every business is finding that working remotely is something probably good and probably a very useful tool in our toolkit, and the judiciary is just the same.
And it's good to hear that our court system is still holding up well and holding up strong during this pandemic. Judge Denise Hood, we appreciate having you on with us today.
All right. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely.
Stay safe.
You as well. Anytime, we appreciate having you on. U.S. District Judge Denise Page Hood. She is the Chief Judge of the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Michigan with us on the Oakland County MegaCast.